What's going on, guys? It's Eric. Quick question for you. What's your favorite camera that you've ever used for any reason? You know, I think all of us, for one reason or another, have one particular camera that we gravitate to, that we feel we take our best pictures with, that we just enjoy using. In my case, it's this camera, the Pentax 6.7, and we're going to talk about it. That's the plan. I hope you're with me. So the Pentax 6.7 is a camera that was originally introduced by the Pentax company, Japanese camera manufacturer, in the 1960s. It's had a number of different iterations, starting with this one. This is the Pentax 6x7 or 6x7 non-mirror lockup edition. To me, the most interesting thing about this camera right off the bat is the form factor. It's essentially just a giant SLR camera. So if you're familiar with 35mm film cameras or modern DSLRs, this isn't gonna look foreign to you. And in all honesty, it functions exactly the same, just on a much larger scale. It shoots a 6x7 format 120 film, so it's a medium format camera shooting a really big wide image. One thing that's really nice about this camera is that format, that 6x7 format, scales really nicely to prints. So if you're a landscape photographer, something like that, this can be a really nice option. So the story behind this camera is kind of interesting. I bought this body on eBay, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that at this point. And used it like crazy. As I pointed out, though, this is the 6x7. This is an old camera from the 60s, and it does not have the mirror lockup option on this. Why would you want a mirror lockup? Well, when you're dealing with a giant camera with a giant mirror, it slaps like crazy. When you take an exposure, it creates quite a bit of vibration. And if you're taking something where you're gonna need a longer exposure, like, I don't know, landscapes, waterfalls, things like that, that vibration that introduces can blur your images, so it's not ideal. Enter the Pentax 6.7. There's a number of different versions of this camera running, I think, all the way through the 1990s, and I believe all of them except for this one have that mirror lockup option, where honestly you just hit a button on there. So you would compose your image, get the focus dialed in, get your exposure right, hit that button, it snaps the mirror up, and then all you have to account for is the shutter vibration, so it allows you to take stiller images. So the mirror lockup is right here on the side of the camera, and you would simply, get your exposure and focus ready to go, and then press that up. And as you can see, the mirror is now locked up, and I've wasted an exposure for you guys. So this particular camera, this camera body, this Pentax 6.7, was actually a gift from a viewer who knew I was looking to upgrade and sent me this, and I can't thank you enough. Mike Jankowski is his name, and it absolutely blows my mind, the generosity of people. So yeah, thank you again. Awesome. So why do I like this camera so much? What are the positives of using it? Well, right off the bat, it just feels good. Like I said, if you're familiar with using a 35mm camera or a DSLR, you're going to be immediately familiar with the way this feels, with the way it focuses. It's got a really nice, solid feel to it, and honestly, taking exposure with it, when you hear that mirror and that shutter slap and it's like a gun recoiling, it's really fun. It's super loud. You wouldn't use it if you were like a stealthy street photographer, but it's satisfying. It's visceral. Very mechanical feeling. I love it. One other benefit of using the Pentax 6.7 system is the wide variety of glass available. I have a 55mm lens on there right now. It's a wide angle lens, f4 speed, but the first lens I ever bought was this. This is the 105 2.4, and right off the bat, this is a special lens. I've heard some people say that they're not consistently sharp, that there's some issues with them. I don't know. I'm not perusing lens charts. I'm not obsessing over sharpness detail in the corners. All I know is that this is a gorgeous, gorgeous lens that takes magical looking photographs. It's a little bit of a long normal lens, and suitable for walk around photography if you wanted, but also for things like portraits. And I love it. The big negative, the depth of field, it creates just a beautiful, dreamy look. Someone I follow, I think on Instagram, recently posted that medium format makes you feel like you can step inside a photograph, and this lens and this system really creates that feeling. It's incredible. The last lens I own for this, I actually got for cheap. This is a 165 millimeter, 2.8 speed portrait lens. This is probably my least used of the three, not because it's a bad lens, and you can get some really beautiful photographs with this lens. Just because I find that when shooting portraits, I like to shoot pretty close to wide open. And at this length, with this system, it can be tough to dial in focus accurately to hit it consistently. But yeah, it's still, I mean, I'll show you. I've taken some really pretty photos with this, and I definitely don't hate it and would like to use it more. So I like this camera a lot. Obviously, I love this camera, but there are some negatives that are worth taking into account if you're considering it. First is the weight. As you can see, this is a very large camera. It weighs a bunch. I don't know exactly how much. Carrying this around for any extended period of time, I could see getting tiring. I'm a relatively young man and, in decent shape, and I will find this kind of fatigues your forearms after a while. There is an optional wooden grip attachment that you can get. It looks gorgeous, and it's something I would love to get. I haven't been able to find one that's not like exorbitantly priced though, but I could see that making it much easier to carry this around. I will say that because of the standard SLR style form factor, it is much easier to carry this around for an extended period of time than something like my Mamiya RB67, which is essentially just a big box with a lens attached to it. So that is something worth keeping in mind. So just a couple of other negatives with this. Neither have really been a huge deal for me, but I could see them affecting some people depending on what you're looking to use this for. So keep them in mind. Of course, right off the bat, because it is 6x7, you're only getting like 9 or 10 exposures per roll of film. That's just unavoidable. You only have so much film to shoot on there, and it's a big negative. So if that bothers you, consider, a 35 millimeter camera or even something like a 6x4.5. More importantly, if you're someone who does studio photography or anything where you're going to want to sync flashes to this, I think the max sync speed on this is something like 1/30th of a second. I have shot photographs with this sync to a flash, and they turned out okay. But just keep that in mind. You might want to consider something with like a leaf shutter if you're hoping to do studio work. This is not ideal for that. And last, it is worth considering that even with the mirror lockup, if you are planning to do any sort of like landscape photography or long exposures, you are going to want to get a sturdy tripod, something really heavy. I know they say that the tripod should weigh at least as much as the camera. That means you're going to be investing in a decent tripod with this, because anything else is going to shake. There's just no way around it. What I want to do now is jump in and take a look at some photographs that I've taken with this camera. My initial video on this was, I don't know, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, and I wasn't as well versed. I've taken a lot of photographs with this camera with all three of these lenses, and I'd like to show you some of the results I got. I think that despite the fact that I took them, a lot of them are really good. I'm the limiting factor. I'm the bottleneck there. My talent as a photographer, not the quality of this gear. This stuff is incredible. So yeah, let's dive in and look at some photographs, and you can get an idea of what this camera can do. Alright, so these first few photographs here are all taken on the 105mm 2.4, and they are all among the very first photos I took with this camera when I first got it. This one of my parents' dog, I think might actually be from the very first roll I ever put through that camera. I just can't stress enough how beautiful the 105 is. It's got an absolutely magical look. The fall off from the in focus areas to the out of focus areas is really incredible. It's dreamy. I don't know if it's the sharpest lens in the world. I've read some conflicting reports on that, but I don't particularly care. It's a super versatile, super beautiful lens. It can be used for landscape photos, as you can see here. I do feel to a certain extent like you're kind of trying to cram the landscape into the longer lens, but that can, lead to some creative opportunities that you maybe wouldn't get with a wider lens, and it certainly works beautifully for portraits. The out of focus areas are just creamy, buttery, smooth, and gone, and the in focus parts are tack sharp. All in all, I love it. It's, relatively small, light, easy to carry around, and yeah, it's great. I can't recommend that lens enough. I debated pretty heavily between getting the 90mm, which would be a slightly wider normal lens. That's an f2.8 lens in this one, and just on the basis of photographs that I'd seen online, decided to go with the 105. And honestly, I almost think that if you're buying this camera, if you're buying a Pentax 6.7, it should be required to pick up the 105 2.4. It's just a very special lens that takes very special images. One thing that I think is kind of funny and worth keeping in mind is that all of these photographs, I believe every single photograph in this video, was taken with my old Pentax 6x7 non-mirror lockup edition. So, mirror lockup is obviously a really desirable feature and is present on most models of this camera. But if you find an old, non-mirror lockup Pentax 6x7 in good shape, I wouldn't hesitate to grab it, especially if you're going to be shooting primarily handheld. Now, these photos were taken with the 165mm 2.8. They're from a single portrait shoot that I did a couple summers ago. I think they're sort of a mixed bag, but I think honestly there's enough here that I would like to get back and try that lens again. Out of the 3 lenses I own, it's definitely the hardest to consistently nail focus, owing primarily to that longer focal length, but I'd be anxious to try this again and see if I couldn't get some good results out of it. And last we have the 50mm f4 wide angle lens. So it's a little bit slower of a lens than the last 2 we talked about. So you're gonna wanna use, a little bit faster film or make sure you've got a lot of available light. But I've actually kind of been blown away by how much I enjoy using this lens. I think I spent like $150 on it, and I've gotten my money's worth and then some. It's surprisingly actually a very graceful lens in the way it kind of handles the fall off from the in focus to out of focus portions of the photograph. It does distort quite a bit, but I think that's sort of par for the course in a wide angle lens, particularly one from, as long ago as this lens is. But yeah, I've been blown away by how many really good, really cool photographs I've managed to take with this. And if you're doing landscapes or maybe even walking around and you want something that's going to be roughly the same focal length as your cell phone camera, this is pretty close and it's a really nice lens. I know some people have recommended the 45mm, but it is a good deal more expensive, and I like this one quite a bit. So yeah, the Pentax 6.7, what a great camera. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I really enjoyed making it. I love this camera, like crazy. So if you've used it, if you like it, if you hate it, let me know down below. If you have any questions about it, by all means, let me know as well. I got like a box of weird old cameras that I'm gonna sort through and see which ones are still working, and hopefully we'll get some weird old camera videos. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much. Stay safe.